She moved with a kind of grace only pain could teach. Her hand cradled the curve of her abdomen, and the other steadied herself against the granite countertop. Bryden. The name was already a lullaby in her heart. She reached for the cup but paused. The espresso had stopped dripping. So had the jazz. A glitch in the system? Her brow furrowed. Colton always kissed her forehead before leaving. Always whispered, "You two are my universe." Yet the penthouse was still. No echo of his voice. No trace of his cologne trailing through the hall. Welcome to Love and Twilight with Dr. Phillips. You've just entered a space where heartfelt stories meet gentle wisdom. Where love, hope, and connection shine through the twilight of life. Whether you're here for inspiration, guidance, or simply a touch of romance, you're in the right place. If you're new, we'd love for you to join our growing family. Subscribe now, and let every new episode bring you closer to stories that uplift and inspire. Don't forget to like, share, and spread the magic with others who cherish love and meaning. Now let's begin. She looked at the time. 10:24 a.m. Colton was never late for the morning board call. Something didn't add up. She turned toward the staircase, heart pacing faster than her feet. The stairs curved like a ribbon toward the master suite. Every step felt like a climb into a storm she couldn't name. Not from the weight of her body, but from the tension wrapping itself around her spine. Halfway up, she stopped. A sound, faint, rhythmic, soft, unfamiliar. She wasn't paranoid. She was pregnant, not delusional. Avery pressed one palm to her chest, the other to the railing, her ears strained. The sound was clearer now, breathless, female, high-pitched, not laughter, not crying, moaning. Avery didn't move. Her fingers tightened on the railing. Her knees locked. Her brain fought the sound, denied it, rebranded it as a hallucination. Stress, maybe. Hormones. Something. Another gasp. Then, a male voice. Deep, familiar. Colton. Avery's breath stilled in her chest. No, no, no. She took the final steps one at a time. Slow, measured. Like if she delayed long enough, the world would fix itself before she saw it. She didn't knock. She pushed open the door. And her heart exploded. Egyptian cotton sheets twisted around two bodies. Her husband, or Colton, pressed between the thighs of a woman whose face she didn't recognize. Naked, moving, gasping. Avery froze at the threshold. Her fingers slipped from the doorknob. Her mind shut down before her body could scream. Colton turned, mid-thrust. Avery, but she didn't hear the rest. Her vision blurred. Her chest caved. Her knees buckled. She collapsed. Hard. Downstairs, the espresso machine beeped. Forgotten. Colton's voice cracked the silence like glass on marble. Avery, his body untangled from the mess of sweat and sin, scrambled toward the edge of the bed, naked shame trailing behind him. The woman beside him gasped, pulled the duvet to cover herself, and shrank into the pillows like a shadow caught in daylight. Avery didn't respond. She couldn't. Her body lay sprawled across the threshold of the bedroom, silk robe tangled. Around her thighs, her hair fanned across the cold, hard floor. Her swollen stomach rose in slow, shallow waves. But her face, still blank, pale. Colton dropped to his knees. No, no, no. Avery, baby, wake up, please. He cupped her cheek. Her head lolled to the side. Her lips were slightly parted. But her eyes, they didn't move. His heart slammed against his ribs. The pulse in his throat throbbed so hard it choked him. He reached instinctively for her belly, whispering her name, then the baby's. Bryden? Bryden, please be okay. Don't do this to me. His palms hovered, terrified to touch. The mistress, who moments ago was calling his name in ecstasy, now stared, wide-eyed and frozen. Colton turned, voice venom. Get out. She blinked. I said, get out. She clutched the sheet tighter and stumbled out of the room, leaving behind perfume, lipstick stains, and the kind of silence only regret can birth. Colton returned his focus to Avery. Her breathing was shallow, too shallow. Her forehead had a purple bruise where it struck the floor. His hands were shaking as he reached for his phone. But he didn't have it. It was still on the nightstand. He crawled, naked, frantic, grabbed the device, dialed. 911. What's your emergency? My wife. She's pregnant. 8 months. She collapsed. She's not waking up. I think she hit her head. I need help now. The dispatcher's voice was calm. Too calm. Colton wanted to punch the sky for how calm the world stayed while his wife lay lifeless at his feet. Is she breathing, sir? Barely. Is she bleeding? No. Stay on the line. Help is on the way. It took 7 minutes. He counted everyone. By the time the paramedics arrived, Avery hadn't moved. Colton had wrapped her in his robe, supported her head with a pillow, and knelt beside, her whispering apologies, promises, prayers, anything that came to his lips. The doorbell rang. He sprinted barefoot to the elevator panel and buzzed them in. They came with urgency, 2 men and a woman, rolling a stretcher, carrying gear, calm but fast. She's 31, 34 weeks pregnant. She collapsed. She hit her head. She hasn't woken up. Is this the first time? Yes. Any complications during pregnancy? No, nothing. They checked her vitals, stabilized her neck, fitted an oxygen mask. One of them looked up. She needs immediate imaging. Let's go. Colton's voice cracked. I'm coming with her. You'll need pants, the woman medic said without judgment. He didn't argue. He ran to the closet, pulled on joggers, forgot shoes. When they wheeled Avery out, Colton followed like a ghost. The penthouse, the empire, the view, the wealth, none of it mattered anymore. Nothing existed but the echo of her body hitting the ground and the scream still trapped in his throat. The hospital doors slid open with a mechanical hiss. Fluorescent lights hit Colton like judgment. The scent of antiseptic and urgency filled his lungs as he followed the stretcher through the emergency wing. Avery still hadn't woken up. A nurse ran beside the gurney, shouting vitals to the on-call trauma team. 31-year-old female, 8 months pregnant, sustained head trauma. Initial assessment shows slight tachycardia, fetal status unknown. Colton tried to keep up, but his legs felt like sandbags. They turned a corner, and he was blocked by a staff member in navy scrubs. You can't go past this point, sir. She's my wife. That's my child in her body. We understand, but we need space to work. Please, please help her. The nurse's voice softened. We'll do everything we can. Colton stepped back. The door closed. He was alone. He backed into a bench near the wall and collapsed into it, hands gripping the edge, eyes locked on the floor. He didn't cry. Not yet. Crying would have meant he believed she was gone. Minutes passed like years. He heard codes being called. A baby's cry in a far-off room. Laughter from a nurse's station, but nothing about Avery. Then finally, after what felt like a lifetime, a doctor approached. Male, mid to 40s. Calm face, tired eyes. Colton Steele? Colton shot to his feet. Yes, I'm Dr. Vensley. I was on rotation when she was brought in. Is the baby? She's stable, the doctor began. She suffered a mild concussion from the fall, no internal bleeding. We've admitted her to ICU for monitoring. Colton exhaled hard. His knees almost buckled. But the baby. The doctor hesitated. There's something you need to hear. Colton's chest tightened. What is it? We ran an emergency ultrasound. What we found surprised us. Initially, everything looked fine. Then we noticed a narrowing in one of the fetal arteries. It wasn't visible in the previous scans. It explains the fatigue and dizzy spells she's had recently. Colton blinked. And the baby? The doctor continued. Carefully, your son is holding on. But here's what's even more unexpected. We discovered something else during the imaging. He held up a printed ultrasound photo and pointed at a section near the top. There was another heartbeat earlier in the pregnancy. Colton stared. You mean twins? She was carrying twins, but one didn't survive past the first trimester. It's called vanishing twin syndrome. The surviving twin often adapts to carry the load alone. Your son, he's been compensating for 2 this whole time. She didn't know. Colton whispered. She likely was never told. The early ultrasound might have shown both, but the second faded before viability. No fault of hers. But now, your boy's heart is working twice as hard. Colton sat back down, as if the floor had vanished under his feet. She almost died not knowing she was carrying a fighter. Yes, and he's still fighting. We've placed Avery under close observation, but your son, he's still in there, giving it everything he has. Colton's hands trembled. I need to see her, he said. She's resting. but you can sit beside her." Colton entered the ICU. The room was quiet except for the steady beeping of machines. Avery lay in a white bed, an oxygen tube under her nose, IV lines snaking into her arm. Her lips were dry, her skin pale, but she was breathing. He pulled a chair beside her, took her hand gently. "I don't deserve this seat," he whispered, "but I'll never leave it." He pressed her fingers to his lips. "I never told you about my father," he said softly. "He left my mom when I was 6, said he needed freedom. I hated him for it, swore I'd never be like him." His voice cracked. "But here I am, naked in our bed with someone else while you carried our child and collapsed under the weight of my betrayal." He looked at her face, searching for a twitch, a flicker. "Nothing. I can't undo what you saw, but I can fight for what we still have." He placed her hand gently over her belly. "Bryden's still holding on. So I will too." The ambulance rocked as it sped through Manhattan's gridlocked streets, sirens slicing the air like a scream no one could ignore. Inside, Colton sat at Avery's side, his hands gripping the metal bar on the stretcher so tightly his knuckles turned white. "BP's dropping," one paramedic said, checking the monitor strapped to her wrist. Another medic was already applying cool packs to her neck, monitoring oxygen levels. "She's not fully responsive." Colton kept his eyes on her face, searching for anything. An eyelid twitch, a finger flex. Nothing came. His world wasn't crumbling. It had already crashed. What remained now were fragments. Of her. Of him. He remembered the way she used to hum in the mornings, brushing her hair in front of the mirror while he kissed her shoulder. The way she clutched the first ultrasound photo with trembling fingers, tears glistening in her lashes. He had worshipped that woman, and now he didn't even know if she'd live to tell him how much she hated him. At the hospital's emergency entrance, nurses awaited with open arms and fast hands. The gurney rolled out, doors banged open. Bright lights blinded him, but he never let go of Avery's fingers, not until they pulled him away again at the ICU airlock. "You have to wait here," a nurse told him, "but she's going into imaging. Trust us." The doors shut. He stood alone again. He wandered down the hall to the family waiting area, barely registering the walls, lined with donated art or the muted TV in the corner playing a children's cartoon. His mind was elsewhere, lost in a montage of moments. Their first date, that crumpled poetry book she never traveled without, the letter she wrote him after their first failed IVF. Her words were burned into him. "If I can't give you children, I'll still give you a love that makes the world jealous." He had read it 100 times, and still, he had broken her. His fingers curled into fists, not from anger at the world, at himself, at the selfishness that had led him to a moment of betrayal, one that almost cost him both his wife and their unborn son. He had everything, and he gambled it for what? Attention? Ego? Flesh? A nurse tapped his shoulder, breaking the spiral. "You're Colton Steele?" "Yes." "She's stable now. The doctor is reviewing the scans. You'll be able to see her soon." He nodded, but his body didn't move. He remained on that bench for what felt like an hour, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor. Every second dragged like a punishment. In another room, Avery's body was still, but her mind floated through fog. She drifted through half-formed memories, Colton laughing in a tuxedo, her fingers brushing against his face. During their wedding vows, the warm press of his hand on her belly the night they picked Bryden's name. And then, the sound, moaning, another woman's voice. The bedroom, the bed. Her heart slammed against her chest. Her throat tightened. Even unconscious, the betrayal echoed through her bones. In her subconscious, she saw flashes of Colton's hands on someone else's skin, heard whispers not meant for her, felt the scream that never escaped her lips. Her body was healing, but her heart was bleeding. Colton stood outside the ICU now, forehead against the glass. He could see her through the window. Wires across her chest, IV lines, oxygen, machines blinking. A nurse walked by and slowed down. "Has she moved?" he asked. "She's showing small signs of responsiveness. Keep talking to her. Patients hear more than we think." He nodded slowly. She left. He entered. The beeping welcomed him like an old enemy. The room was too quiet. He moved to her bedside, reached for her hand again, and held it gently. "I don't deserve to be here," he whispered, "but I will never leave." He closed his eyes and rested his forehead against the edge of the bed. And for the first time in a long time, Colton Steele, the man who built an empire from nothing, felt completely, utterly powerless. Dr. Vensley tapped the tablet in his hand, pulling up Avery's imaging. Results again, eyes narrowing slightly at the color-coded charts. Behind him, monitors beeped steadily. 2 nurses stood at the far end of the room, quietly preparing IV replacements. Colton sat beside the hospital bed, his hand curled protectively around Avery's. Her eyelids fluttered occasionally, but hadn't opened. A sheen of sweat coated her brow. "You said the baby's okay," Colton finally said, breaking the silence. "He's holding on," the doctor replied, voice measured. "But I need to show you something." Colton rose, reluctant to let go of Avery's hand, but moved toward the tablet. Dr. Vensley pointed at the ultrasound. This was taken when she arrived. The image was a grainy black and white swirl, until the doctor zoomed in and tapped the screen. "Do you see this?" Colton squinted. "That's Bryden?" "Yes, that's your son's heart, strong but stressed, and here." He tapped again. "This is what surprised us." He enhanced a second area, a faint outline, smaller, faded, almost ghost-like. "There was another heartbeat," the doctor said. Colton frowned. "Another what?" "She was carrying twins." Colton's breath left his lungs. "We believe the second embryo stopped developing sometime in the first trimester. It's a condition called vanishing twin syndrome. It's not uncommon. Many parents never know, especially if they miss the early scans." Colton swallowed hard. "She didn't know?" "No, but the implications go deeper. Your surviving son, he's been overcompensating. His system is working harder. We see slight constriction in the umbilical artery. It's why she fainted. Her body wasn't just carrying one child. It was carrying the memory of 2. Colton stared at the image again, the shadowy blur where a sibling should have been. "Why didn't we catch this before?" "It could have been missed during earlier checkups, or masked by the strong vitals from the remaining fetus. These things slip past even careful eyes." He leaned back, trying to process it all. "And now?" "Right now Avery is stable. Your son, Bryden, is stable. But this isn't something we can ignore. We'll need to monitor her closely every day until delivery. Preterm labor is now a high risk." Colton's eyes dropped to the floor. The guilt swelled again. His voice cracked. "She almost died because of me." The doctor didn't respond immediately. Then, with a professional calm, he said, "She collapsed because her body was under enormous strain. Emotional triggers can intensify physical stress, yes, but no single moment causes this kind of breakdown. It was building." Colton shook his head. "I was the trigger." Dr. Vensley's tone didn't change. "Then what you do now matters more than what you did before." Later that evening, Colton returned to her bedside. Avery was still unconscious, but her hands twitched now. Her breathing had evened out. He sat down, staring at her belly. His voice came out low, cracked. "There was supposed to be 2 of you." He reached out and placed a hand gently over the curve of her stomach. "I didn't even know. And you, little man, you've been fighting like hell without me knowing. Just like your mother always has." He leaned closer, his lips nearly touching the skin of her belly. "I swear, I'll never let you carry that weight alone again." He sat back and looked at Avery. Her lashes trembled faintly against her cheek. Still no words. Still no sign she knew he was there. But he wasn't going anywhere. Not tonight. Not ever again. Colton hadn't moved from the ICU chair in almost 12 hours. Nurses came and went, checking Avery's vitals, adjusting her drip, whispering updates among themselves. He barely registered any of it. The world had collapsed into 3 things: the beep of her monitor, the gentle rise of her chest, and the cold emptiness inside his gut. The man who ruled boardrooms with confidence, who negotiated with steel in his voice and ice in his veins, now sat crumpled in a hospital chair, silent, unshaven, eyes bloodshot. He hadn't eaten. He hadn't slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her falling. Again and again. Her knees giving out. Her body limp on the floor. And each time he saw himself, naked in betrayal. Useless in the moment she needed him most. A nurse named Lila entered, carrying a fresh set of linens. "She's holding steady," she said softly. Colton nodded, but didn't respond. She hesitated. "You should get some rest. The lounge down the hall has a sofa. Just an hour or 2. No." His voice was low, dry. "I won't leave her." Lila gave a gentle smile, the kind reserved for people balancing between grief and guilt. "If she wakes and sees you in this state, she'll worry." He shook his head. "I need to be here when she opens her eyes." The nurse laid the folded blanket on the counter and left without arguing further. Colton stood slowly and walked over to the window. The city lights glowed outside, blinding towers full of people rushing, eating, winning, losing. For so long, he'd lived for that world, dominated it, but none of it mattered now. He leaned his forehead against the glass. Then it happened. His chest tightened, breath caught in his throat. A pressure, sharp and hot, rose through his ribs. He turned away, fists clenched, and then he broke, silently at first, shoulders heaving, mouth shut tight, tears falling, unstoppable. Then came the sound, the kind he hadn't made in decades, a choked sob, pulled from somewhere so deep even he didn't know it existed. He stumbled back to the chair, collapsed into it, covered his face. He wept, not because she might leave him, but because she had every reason to. When the wave passed, Colton pulled a tissue from the bedside drawer and wiped his face. He stared at Avery again, her hand resting slightly to the side of her belly. He reached for it. Her skin was warm. Still here, he slid a small poetry book from his coat pocket, one she loved, the one she kept beside their bed for years. He hadn't touched it since they moved into the penthouse. It was too sentimental, she'd said. He opened to a bookmarked page. Her handwriting marked it with a note. "Read this to me when I forget who I am." He swallowed hard and began. "I do not ask to be loved without flaw, but to be seen in the shadow and still chosen. For the soul has bruises no skin reveals, and the heart its own silent war." His voice cracked. He paused, took a breath, and continued. "If I am weary, hold me. If I am quiet, hear me. And if I fall, wait for me to rise." When he finished, he closed the book and placed it beside her. Then he leaned forward, kissed the back of her hand, and whispered, "I will wait, and I will rise with you." Outside the ICU window, dawn was breaking. But inside, Colton sat still, no longer a CEO, not a billionaire, not a man used to getting what he wanted. Just a husband, waiting to be worthy again. Before Colton Steele became a name whispered in investment circles and stamped on skyscraper blueprints, he was just a big brother with a chip on his shoulder and a little sister failing her senior year in private school. She was brilliant, but rebellious, and no amount of private instructors seemed to reach her. Until one day, the school counselor gave him a name, Avery Moreno, top of her graduate class. Soft-spoken, studied literature and psychology, known for patience. The first time he saw her, she was seated at the corner of a downtown cafe, a pencil tucked behind her ear, reading a weathered paperback with pages marked in 5 colors. She didn't look up until he cleared his throat. "You're Colton?" she asked. "Unfortunately," he replied, sliding into the seat across from her. She gave a polite smile and flipped the book shut. "Your sister is smart. She just doesn't like being told what to do. She gets that from our mother. She also said you fired her last tutor for using the wrong highlighter." He laughed. "That sounds about right." Avery's smile lingered. He wasn't used to women not reacting to his status. She didn't bat an eye when he mentioned his company, didn't ask about his car. She made him feel regular. After the first few sessions, his sister started quoting poetry at dinner, and Colton started finding excuses to be around when Avery arrived. He'd linger in the hallway, ask if she wanted coffee, offer to drive her home after it got dark. One night, after a late session, she agreed. He drove her in silence for most of the ride. City lights painted the windows. Soft music played between them. At a red light, he glanced at her. "Why don't you ever ask me about the company?" he said. She looked at him, puzzled. "Because I'm not tutoring your stocks. I'm used to people asking. Maybe I'm not most people." That answer hit him somewhere he hadn't felt in years. A week later, his sister passed a major test. Avery stayed for dinner. After dessert, she excused herself to the bathroom. Colton stood outside the door when she came out, leaning against the hallway wall. "You know," he said, "I'm not very good at this." "At what?" "Pretending I'm not completely distracted by you." Avery blinked, uncertain. He didn't move, didn't rush. "If this makes you uncomfortable, say the word. I'll back off." She didn't. Instead, she stepped closer, her hand brushing his shirt. I should say no, she whispered. But you won't. She didn't answer. Their kiss was slow, hesitant, her lips trembling slightly, his fingers brushing the side of her neck. It wasn't hunger. It wasn't strategy. It was permission. They started seeing each other in secret. He didn't want to be the headline. She didn't want her name reduced to a scandal. But the nights grew longer. His apartment started to smell like her shampoo. Her books filled his shelves. And slowly, without warning, Avery became the only part of his life that felt real. She read him Neruda before bed, taught him the difference between sonnets and free verse, tucked handwritten notes in his briefcase. One morning, he found a sticky note on his coffee mug. You're not the man the world sees. You're the man who lets me read out loud while he shaves. He kept that note in his wallet for years. Back in the hospital, Colton leaned closer to her sleeping form. You saved my sister's future before you ever became my wife, he whispered. You taught me the only currency that matters is presence, and I spent years bankrupting us with absence. His voice broke. But if you open your eyes, I'll spend the rest of my life making deposits. He closed his eyes and rested his head on her pillow beside her own, waiting, remembering, hoping. The night it happened wasn't planned. There were no rose petals, no champagne flutes, just dim lights spilling from the hallway into the glass elevator of Colton's high-rise. And two people who'd been pretending too long that what they felt wasn't real. Avery had come over late. His sister had finally been accepted into college, and they'd all gone out to celebrate. After dinner, Avery lingered, one hand on her purse strap, one foot hesitating at the edge of the elevator. I should go, she said. You could stay. Her eyes flicked to his. I don't want to be a headline. There's no one else here. He pressed the elevator button. The doors opened. She stepped in first. He followed. The doors closed. Glass walls surrounded them as the city stretched beneath their feet. Silence settled between them. Then he turned toward her. I've wanted to touch you since the night you corrected my grammar, he said softly. I did that in front of your shareholders, and I never forgot it. She laughed, breathless. He stepped closer. Her back met the elevator wall. His hand came up, not to grab, not to demand, but to rest gently near her hip. His eyes asked the question. She nodded. And just like that, it began. Their kiss wasn't flawless. It was hungry, desperate. His hands tangled in her hair. Her lips parted in surrender. The world disappeared. He tasted her name. She clutched his shirt. When the elevator reached his penthouse, he didn't take her straight to the bedroom. He walked her to the kitchen, made tea. They sat in silence, watching steam rise from the mugs. Her fingers trembled as she lifted hers. He noticed. You okay? I've never done this. He raised an eyebrow. Had tea? Had someone want me, for me? His throat tightened. Then let me show you what that feels like. They kissed again on the living room floor, then again in the hallway. By the time they reached the bedroom, clothes had become an afterthought. He undressed her slowly, not with greed, but with awe, like each piece he removed revealed another secret she didn't know she was allowed to share. She undressed him too, hesitant at first, then confident. Once she saw his body wasn't a weapon, it was a vessel for devotion. He laid her down, kissed every inch, every freckle, and when he entered her, it wasn't fast or rough. It was patient, measured, worshipful. They moved together like a question and its answer, her hands threading, through his hair, his mouth tracing the curve of her shoulder. After, they stayed wrapped around each other, breath mingling, hearts thudding in quiet unison. She whispered, Why did you wait so long? I was afraid of ruining something sacred. She smiled against his chest. You already have, she said. But in the best way. That night changed everything. He started canceling meetings just to wake up next to her. She started leaving spare socks in his drawers. He asked her to move in 2 weeks later. She said yes, on one condition, that they never stop being each other's peace. Now, years later, in that sterile hospital room, Colton remembered the exact way her breath caught the first time he touched her. How her eyes fluttered shut when he whispered her name against her skin. How she told him, over and over, that she didn't need grand gestures. Just presence, just honesty, just him. He took her hand in his again, and waited for her to come back to him. Avery never expected her body to betray her. She had always been healthy. Balanced diet, yoga at sunrise, a steady rhythm to her life. But after 2 years of trying, tracking dates, taking vitamins, praying over test sticks, nothing happened. The silence of those early months grew louder with every passing cycle. At first, Colton was hopeful. He brought home pregnancy books, picked out baby names, talked about nursery wallpaper and rocking chairs. But as each negative test piled up in the drawer beneath their sink, a quiet tension crept into their home. Avery cried alone in the shower one morning. That was the first time she admitted it to herself. Something wasn't working. The fertility doctor's office was too white, too clean. The woman behind the desk smiled too much. Avery hated all of it. They sat side by side, holding the same clipboard, reading through. The options, hormone injections, blood work, ultrasound tracking. Then came the numbers, success rates, failure rates, side effects. Colton squeezed her hand. "I'm with you," he said. She didn't look up. "Even if I can't give you what you want." He turned to her fully. "I want you. Not a blueprint, not an outcome. You." She wanted to believe him. The first round of IVF was brutal. Avery's mood shifted wildly. The medications made her body ache in ways she didn't expect. She'd stare at herself in the mirror and feel like a stranger in her own skin. One night, after a particularly painful injection, she curled up on the bathroom floor. Knees pulled to her chest, whispering apologies to a child that didn't exist. Colton found her there. He didn't say anything, just sat beside her, pulled her into his lap, held her until she stopped shaking. Then he drew a warm bath, lit candles, and without a word, bathed her like she was porcelain. The second round failed. Avery received the call while he was in a meeting. She didn't wait. She sent him a single message. It didn't work. "Don't come home. I need space." Colton ignored it. He left the office, turned off his phone, and drove straight home. She was in bed, back turned to the door. He didn't speak, just climbed in beside her, wrapped his arms around her waist, and whispered into the dark, "I don't want space. I want you." She cried into the pillow until morning. It was during the fourth cycle, when they both started expecting failure, that the miracle happened. The nurse's voice on the phone shook. "It's positive." Avery sat in stunned silence, phone pressed to her ear. "Say that again?" "You're pregnant. Your hormone levels are strong. You did it." Tears welled instantly. Colton was in the kitchen when she walked in, holding the phone in one hand, her other covering her mouth. He looked up, eyes wide. She nodded. He dropped the coffee mug he was holding. It shattered across the floor. And then, so did they. Into laughter, into tears, into each other's arms. From that day forward, everything changed. He read every book, attended every appointment, kissed her stomach each morning like a ritual. He was tender, present, gentle, and Avery, she bloomed. Even on the tired days, she felt powerful, chosen, seen. She carried not just a child, but the weight of every tear they had ever shed to get there. Back in the hospital room, Colton traced circles across her hand. "You fought so hard," he whispered. "You made me believe again. You made me a father long before we heard the heartbeat." He leaned in, resting his forehead against the edge of the bed. "And I repaid you with betrayal." His voice cracked. "You carried our miracle, and I carried ego." He kissed her wrist, just below the hospital band. "But I'm still here." He looked at her face, so still yet so full of quiet strength. "And I will stay until you believe in me again." The ICU had its own rhythm, quiet, clinical, suspended in time. Machines hummed softly. Nurses moved efficiently, barely speaking above a whisper. Patients drifted in and out of sedation like boats floating through a fog. Avery didn't speak. She didn't open her eyes, but her body was holding on. Colton stayed by her side. He learned the names of every nurse on the rotation. He memorized the numbers on the monitors, even though he barely understood them. He refused to sleep anywhere else. The staff eventually stopped trying to convince him. Each hour bled into the next. He didn't check his phone. He didn't respond to calls. His world had narrowed down to the few feet between the chair and her bedside. He read to her. He started with her favorite, Neruda. "I want to do with you what spring does with the cherry trees." Then he moved to Rumi, to Audre Lorde, even her dog-eared poetry journal from their apartment. Each word was an offering, each verse a way to remind her that someone was still waiting. In the silence between readings, he talked to her. Not about business, not about headlines. He told her things he never said aloud. I remember the first night we moved into the penthouse. You made toast in a $1 million kitchen because you didn't want to taint the stove with your cooking. He chuckled softly. You called it your apartment in the sky, but you never let me forget where we started. You taped our grocery lists to the fridge, still used coupons, still wore the same cotton nightgown, even when I bought you silk. He glanced at her face, looking for any reaction. Stillness. But he kept going. You were the only person who didn't change when everything else did. His voice dropped. And I changed so much, I forgot who I was. He stood up, walked to the window, and let his forehead rest against the cool glass. Do you know what I did, Avery, while you were carrying our son? I let someone into our bed. The words felt like poison. I thought it was meaningless, a distraction, a mistake I could erase before you ever found out. He turned back toward her. But it wasn't just a mistake, it was a choice. And it hurt you. He returned to her bedside. I saw the way your body crumpled that morning. I saw the light leave your eyes before you even hit the floor. His jaw clenched. I would give every dollar, every deal, every board seat just to take that moment back. A nurse came in with fresh saline bags. She checked the chart without saying a word. Colton stepped aside but didn't leave the room. When the nurse was done, she paused by the door. She's stable, she said gently. That's more than many get at this stage. Thank you, he replied. She has someone waiting. That helps more than people think. After she left, Colton sat down again. I don't deserve another chance with you. I know that. He reached for her hand once more. But I want it. Not because it's easy, but because I'll earn it every day. The clock read 3:47 a.m. when he finally laid his head beside her arm and closed his eyes. Not to sleep, just to be closer. He didn't notice the small twitch in her fingers, the subtle shift in her breathing, the way her eyelids flickered, like someone surfacing from deep water. He missed the first sign of her return, but when she opened her eyes next, he would be there, exactly where she left him. Colton hadn't touched his phone in nearly 2 days, but it buzzed relentlessly, screen lighting up again and again with mist, calls, board alerts, and muted headlines that no longer mattered. He ignored them all, until one message came through with a name he hadn't expected to see again. Sienna. His eyes narrowed at the screen. She hadn't tried reaching out since the ambulance took Avery away. Not a word. Not even fake concern. Now there it was. I didn't know she was that far along. I didn't mean for this to happen. Please, call me. He stared at the message. No punctuation, no apology, just a weak defense wrapped in cowardice. He deleted it without replying. Moments later, another arrived. Colton, don't shut me out. You came to me. Don't act like this is all on me. He read that one 3 times. Each word burned hotter than the last. He had no illusion that she loved him. Their nights together had been empty, built on ego and nothing else. But this message, this rewriting of guilt, it struck something deep. He blocked her number, and for the first time since Avery's collapse, he allowed himself to feel anger. Not just at Sienna, at himself, at the version of him that believed he could separate the physical from the emotional. That betrayal could be a private sin without public consequences. That Avery, his wife, his anchor, could ever be replaced, even for a moment. Colton stood by the ICU window again, hands clenched into fists. Outside, the city pulsed with life. Cars rushed, horns blared, lights changed. But inside, everything had slowed. He pulled out his phone again, not to check messages, but to open the camera roll. There she was, Avery, laughing on the balcony in an oversized sweatshirt. Avery, asleep on the couch, one hand on her belly. Avery at the doctor's office, eyes wide at the first heartbeat. His thumb hovered over one photo, an image from their last vacation. Avery barefoot on the sand, holding her sandals in one hand, hair blowing across her face. She looked peaceful, whole. He couldn't remember the last time she'd looked at him like that. Back in the room, he sat again. The nurses had changed her fourth. Her color looked better. Her breathing was still steady. But she hadn't stirred since the early morning twitch. He looked at her fingers. The same hands that had pulled him out of more dark nights than he could count. The hands that had touched his face after every failed embryo transfer. The hands that had written sticky notes and tucked them into his luggage with messages like, "Come home better than you left." He took those hands in his now and whispered, "She tried to contact me." His voice shook, but I blocked her. I didn't respond, not because I'm trying to protect myself, but because she has no place in what I'm building now. He looked at her face, still unmoved. "I wish you had screamed at me, hit me, told me I was garbage, but you didn't. You collapsed." The weight of that truth pressed down again. "I made you carry everything, not just the baby, but my silence, my selfishness, my distance. You walked around with it like armor, and I didn't even see you cracking." He lowered his head. "I see you now." Another message came through, this time from his assistant. "Board wants an emergency call by noon. Investors are rattled. Press is asking for a statement." He read it, then typed a response. "Tell them the CEO is unavailable until his wife and child are safe. The company can wait." He put the phone away and returned to Avery's side. Night draped over the city again, the skyline flickering behind dark clouds. Inside the hospital, the quiet deepened. Most of the hallway lights dimmed. Nurses spoke in murmurs. And in ICU room 3B, Colton lit the small, battery-powered candle he found in Avery's hospital bag. She had packed it weeks ago, along with a soft lavender blanket, her favorite lip balm, and a paperback of poetry. Her calm kit, she called it. He turned the candle on and placed it on the side table. A warm glow danced across her cheekbones. "You always hated the cold," he whispered. Said hospital lighting was too harsh for comfort. He sat back, arms crossed, eyes on the soft amber reflection. The doctors said there was no brain damage, that she was resting, healing. But hours felt like days, and hope, though alive, was fragile. He leaned forward, resting his arms on the bed, and began to speak. Not in apology, but in confession. "I stopped praying a long time ago." His voice was calm, almost too quiet. "Somewhere between chasing deals and outgrowing my mentors, I started believing I didn't need help, that I could control everything." He paused. "Then you walked into my life, and everything I ever tried to manage unraveled into meaning." He swallowed hard. "I still didn't pray. Not really. I just believed loving you was enough." He looked at her, eyes closed, breathing even, but silent. "And now, here I am," he said, "lighting fake candles and whispering words to a woman who might not hear me." His throat tightened. "I'm praying now, Avery. Not because I suddenly became spiritual, not because it's convenient, but because I've run out of everything else to do." He lowered his head. "And if there's anyone listening, then I'm begging for one more chance." He stayed in that posture for a while, not crying, not angry, still. Then he stood, took the poetry book from her bag, and opened to a page she had bookmarked with a photograph of them dancing barefoot on a cabin porch. He remembered that night, the wind, her laughter. He read aloud, "If I go before you, I will leave the light on, not in the hallway, but in your chest, the place where my hand used to rest. And when you breathe, I'll breathe with you. Even in silence, especially in silence." He closed the book and looked at her. "You always believed love was a form of prayer." He reached for her hand again, slipped his fingers between hers. "I'm not leaving this room. I don't care if it takes a week, a month." He leaned closer. "When you wake up, I'll be here, and if you don't," his voice broke slightly, "I'll still be here." In the corner, the fake candle flickered once, almost as if on cue. Outside, thunder rolled in the distance. And inside, Colton settled back into the chair, drew the blanket over his lap and closed his eyes. Not to sleep, just to wait. It happened in the quiet just before morning. The hum of machines remained steady. The soft drip of the IV line tapped a rhythm into the silence. Colton had drifted into a shallow rest, his head resting against the mattress. Near Avery's side, his fingers still loosely intertwined with hers. Avery's eyelids fluttered, the kind of flicker that starts in dreams. A twitch, a tremble, then stillness again. Her brows furrowed, her throat moved. Then, slowly, her eyes opened. It wasn't a sudden jolt. It wasn't dramatic. It was the cautious, blinking return of someone dragging herself from a faraway place. Her gaze wandered around the ceiling, then to the walls, then to the glowing monitor near her head. Confusion set in first, then memory struck. Her hand jerked weakly, causing Colton's fingers to shift. He stirred, lifted his head. The moment their eyes met, time froze. He blinked like he didn't believe what he was seeing. She didn't speak. Neither did he. His lips parted, trembling slightly. Avery. Her voice came out hoarse, broken. Colton. He reached for the call button, pressed it. Nurses would come. Doctors. Machines. But he didn't take his eyes off her. "You're awake," he whispered. Her throat tightened. "Our baby?" He nodded quickly. "Still fighting. Just like you." She let out a shaky breath. Her hand, still weak, moved to her belly. When she felt the pressure of the roundness still there, her shoulders relaxed by a fraction. "He's okay?" she asked again, quieter. "He's strong," Colton replied. "He's not giving up." Avery turned her head slowly toward him. Her eyes were glassy, voice thinner than he remembered. "You were with someone else." The room dropped 10 degrees. He didn't deny it, didn't look away. "I was," he said, "and I will never forgive myself for that." She stared at him for a long moment, his image blurry through the tears she refused to let fall. He lowered his voice. "But I will spend the rest of my life showing you I know what I destroyed. You broke me. I know. You broke everything. I know," he repeated. She didn't scream, didn't cry. The betrayal still sat between them like a sharp edge. But something in her gaze softened, not forgiveness, not yet, but acknowledgement. "You stayed," she said after a while. "I never left." Her breathing hitched. "I didn't think you would." He leaned in closer, voice steady, but low. "I'm not leaving this bed until you walk out of here, and when you do, I'll still be beside you." Avery turned her face away slightly, blinking up at the ceiling. The effort exhausted her, but she wasn't ready to close her eyes again. Not yet. "You were supposed to protect me," she whispered. Colton's hand brushed her knuckles. "I failed you." Her lips barely moved. "Yes." He didn't flinch. "But I didn't die." His eyes stung. "No. You didn't. I wanted to." Her voice cracked. "Just for a second. When I saw you, like that, I thought maybe it would be easier to let go." Colton dropped his head, unable to speak. "I couldn't," she continued, "because of him. Because he's inside me." "You both stayed," he whispered. She didn't answer that. She closed her eyes. For a moment, he thought she'd fallen asleep again. But then she murmured, "Start by kissing me." His head snapped up. "What?" Her voice was so faint it was nearly silent. "Not like a lover, not yet. Just kiss me, like I matter." He rose slowly, leaning over her, eyes locked with hers. Then he pressed his lips gently to her palm. She closed her eyes again, and this time, when she fell asleep, there was peace on her face. Avery woke again 2 hours later, alert this time. Her voice was still raspy, her limbs weak, but her eyes, those unmistakable eyes, were steady, focused, and sharp. She asked for water. Colton helped her drink. She asked what day it was. He told her. She didn't ask about the woman. Not once. And Colton knew better than to bring her up. She didn't need names. She didn't want details. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Some wounds didn't need dissecting to bleed. What mattered to Avery in that moment was only what was in front of her. Her pulse. Her child. And the man who had shattered her now seated with unmovable presence at her side. She looked at him as he peeled an orange for her, slowly, carefully, as if each slice were breakable. "Do I look different?" she asked. Colton glanced up, surprised. "What do you mean?" She stared down at her hands. "I feel different, like something cracked inside me when I hit the ground. I haven't figured out if that's good or bad yet." He placed the fruit aside and took her hand. "You look stronger." "Strong feels like too much effort right now." "Then you don't have to be." "Not today." She didn't reply. Her fingers curled slightly around his. The doctor came in an hour later with updates. The baby's vitals had stabilized. Avery's tests looked promising. She'd need to stay a few more nights and then home rest until delivery. When the doctor left, she sat in silence for a while. Then she said, "I was dreaming when I was unconscious. I kept hearing the baby cry. But when I tried to find him, you were there." He leaned in. "And you weren't the man from the bed," she whispered. "You were the one who used to hold me after every injection, the one who read Neruda to distract me from the needles." Her voice faltered. "It made me want to live." Colton swallowed hard. "I meant every word I said while you were asleep." I heard some of it. He looked up. Not all. Just enough. She shifted slowly in the bed. But hearing love and feeling it, they're different. I know. You lost your way. I did. You think words can rebuild what you broke? No, he said quietly. Only time and proof. She turned toward him. Then stop trying to convince me. Just keep showing up. I will. She looked toward the window. The sun had broken through the clouds, soft light casting across the room. I'm scared, she admitted. Of what? That if I let myself believe in you again, I'll fall harder next time. He moved closer but didn't touch her. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking for the chance to never put you in that place again. She closed her eyes, breathed deeply, then opened them again. Then you'd better be ready to earn your way back, every day. I am. For the rest of the afternoon, she didn't speak much. He sat beside her, adjusting her blanket when it slipped, helping her. Sip tea, placing warm compresses where she asked without question. Not once did she ask about Sienna, and not once did Colton mention her. Because the real work of repair wasn't about rehashing what had already caused damage. It was about whether he could help her feel safe again in a world he had fractured. And in that quiet room, with machines humming and the soft tick of the wall, clock counting slow seconds, Avery began to believe that maybe, just maybe, he might. A nurse wheeled in Avery's dinner tray, chicken broth, crackers, a pale fruit cup. Nothing appealing, but she hadn't eaten in almost 2 days. She stirred the broth with her spoon slowly, as if waiting for the smell to become appetizing. Colton watched her from the chair beside her bed, elbows on knees, hands clasped. You don't have to eat it, he said gently. She took a bite anyway. It was more about proving she still could. When she finished half the tray, she set the spoon down and wiped her mouth with the napkin. They said I'll be here 2 more nights? Yes. They're keeping you monitored for contractions and checking Bryden's growth every 6 hours. Avery's eyes flicked downward toward her belly. She placed her hand there, fingers moving slowly over the curve. He hasn't kicked since I woke up. Colton straightened. The nurse said that's normal after trauma. He's conserving energy. She nodded, but didn't look convinced. I want to feel him again. I need to. Colton leaned closer. Then let's talk to him. Avery looked at him. He placed both hands gently on either side of her belly and lowered his voice. Hey, little man, it's Dad. Your mom's awake. She's a fighter just like you. And we're here, all 3 of us. Still standing. So if you're listening, buddy, give her a sign. Anything. He glanced at Avery. He's listening. A moment passed. Then a nudge. Small, gentle, but real. Her hand shot to the spot. There it was again. A second kick. Avery gasped. Tears sprang to her eyes. Oh, Bryden. Colton smiled, eyes glassy. He heard you. She looked at him and didn't speak for a while. Just kept her hand on the movement as if to anchor herself to that tiny spark of life still inside her. After a long silence, she said, I can't promise I'll forgive you. I'm not asking you to. I can't promise I won't resent you some mornings. I'll still bring your tea. She glanced at him. I don't want this to be about apologies, Colton. It won't be. I want actions. I want you present. I want the man I fell in love with to show up again. Not just for me, for him. Colton didn't hesitate. He will. You said something when I was unconscious, about staying beside me until I walked out of here. I meant it. Good, she said softly, because I want you to help me walk again. Her eyes held his. Not just out of this hospital. Back into myself. He leaned forward, resting his hand over hers. Then that's what we'll do. Together. Avery's voice dropped to a whisper. Say it. Colton straightened, knowing exactly what she meant. I vow, he began, to stand beside you, not in front, not behind. I vow to carry our child in your heart with the same hands. I vow not to rebuild what I broke, but to build something stronger beside you. I vow to make every day a reason to believe in us again. She didn't speak, didn't cry. She simply nodded. And for the first time since the collapse, Colton felt like she might actually see him again, not as the man who failed her, but as the one fighting to be worthy now. Avery's fingers lingered near the edge of the bedsheet. She looked stronger now, not recovered, but rooted. The color had returned to her cheeks, and her posture, once sunken, had started to hold weight again. It was after her second full meal that she asked, I want a bath. Colton looked up from the book he had been pretending to read. The nurse said sponge baths are scheduled tomorrow. I don't want the nurse, she replied. There was silence. I want you. Colton set the book down, cautiously. Are you sure? Her voice didn't waver. Yes. She didn't elaborate. Didn't use the moment as a test. There was no accusation in her tone, no seduction. It was a request, plain, intentional, and vulnerable. Colton stood. Then let's do it right. The hospital's private recovery suite included a full bathing room, one of the benefits of his connections and insistence on privacy. He filled the tub with warm water, tested the temperature 3 times, dimmed the overhead light, pulled a towel from the warmer. When he returned to her room, she was already sitting up, swinging her legs slowly over the side of the bed. I'll carry you, he said. I can walk. Avery, I can walk. But when she put weight on her feet, her legs trembled. Colton stepped in before she fell. She didn't protest when he lifted her. Her head rested against his shoulder, her breath shallow against his collarbone. His grip was steady, protective, but not possessive. He entered the bath suite and lowered her gently into the water. She let out a breath as the warmth wrapped around her body. Colton sat behind her, still clothed but barefoot, folding his knees so she could lean back between them. Her head rested against his chest. His arms formed a cradle beneath the surface. For a long time, neither spoke. Steam rose around them. Only the sound of her breathing and the occasional drip from the faucet filled the room. Then she whispered, You used to do this after every failed transfer. He nodded. You always said I deserved softness, no matter how broken I felt. You did. You still do. She turned her face slightly toward his throat. Then treat me like you remember. Colton didn't rush. He picked up the sponge beside the tub, dipped it, squeezed the warm water down the curve of her shoulder, over her collarbone, down her arm. Her skin shimmered in the dim light. He moved carefully, reverently, like a man handling something fragile, not out of guilt, but gratitude. She closed her eyes. He ran the sponge along her back, trailing steam in slow lines. His hand followed, not to grope or possess, but to hold. When his fingers brushed her belly beneath the water, she exhaled, sharp and trembling. I still want you, she said. His breath caught. But it's not about sex, not yet, not today. I know. She turned slightly in his arms, adjusting her body to face him better. Her hand slid up to his chest. You broke something in me, she said softly. I know. And still, my body remembers you. He cupped her cheek. I'll never take it for granted again. She didn't smile. Instead, she leaned forward and rested her forehead against his. No more pretending we're okay. If we're going to make it, really make it, it has to be built from the ground up. I'll start digging, he whispered. She pulled back, searching his eyes. Then earn your way in. One act at a time. He kissed her temple, slow and firm. And in that bath, surrounded by warmth and water and quiet resolve, something began to shift. Not forgiveness, but return. The water had gone lukewarm, but neither of them moved. Avery sat with her knees drawn up slightly, her back against Colton's chest, both of them wrapped in silence and slow, rhythmic breath. She rested her cheek on his shoulder, eyes closed, not asleep, just still. Colton's hand skimmed gently across the surface of the water, tracing lines along her arm. I didn't think I'd ever be close to you like this again, he murmured. Her voice came quiet. My mind hasn't forgiven you. I wouldn't expect it to, but my body hasn't let you go. He let his hand fall still. She shifted slightly, turning so she could see him better. Her bare skin glistened in the candlelight glow. The curves of her shoulders, the heaviness of her breasts, the small stretch marks around her hips, every part of her was a map of survival. And every part still responded to him. Colton didn't speak. He looked at her with something far beyond desire. There was no hunger in his gaze, only reverence. Avery reached up and ran a finger along his jaw. Her touch was deliberate, unhurried. I hated you, she whispered. I hated myself. I still do, some days. He nodded. But even then, her fingers trailed down to his collarbone. I would have given anything just to feel your hands again. Colton lifted one hand from the water and placed it on her waist. Slowly, lightly. Here? She nodded. Then here too, he said, sliding it lower. just beneath the curve of her belly. She inhaled, her spine arching faintly. The silence grew heavier, charged. He leaned forward and kissed the hollow at the base of her neck. Not rushed, not possessive. A single reverent press of lips to skin. She reached behind her hand curling around the back of his neck, pulling him just a little closer. Her voice dropped. I want to remember this, not because of what we were, but because I need to know we're still capable. His mouth found her shoulder, her back, then lower, following the path of her breath, not her words. She turned in the water, facing him now. No barriers, no hesitation. Colton cupped her face, looking at her as if seeing her for the first time. You're the only home I've ever wanted, he said. She kissed him then. Soft, slow, but firm. And the moment their lips met, something broke open. Her body moved to straddle him. His hands held her gently, guiding, never forcing. They didn't speak. There were no apologies here, no explanations, only breath, only touch. Water sloshed against porcelain as she slid down onto him, every inch a deliberate reclaiming. Her head fell to his shoulder as she gasped, not from pain, but memory, a memory her body had never let go. He didn't thrust. He held her. Buried deep inside her, he let her set the pace. Slow, intentional. She rocked against him, one hand braced on his chest, the other gripping the edge of the tub. He kissed the inside of her wrist, her jaw, her sternum. She let out a moan, quiet, broken, holy. Tears slipped from her lashes. Not sorrow, release. And when her body shuddered around him, pulling him deeper, grounding him inside. She pressed her forehead to his and whispered, "Don't ruin this again." "I won't." They stayed like that, joined, breathless, shaking. Not because it fixed anything, but because it reminded them that even in the aftermath, even with broken parts, they were still alive. The air in the room was thick with heat and silence. The bathwater had cooled, but neither Avery nor Colton moved to leave it. Her arms rested around his shoulders, her cheek pressed against his chest. Their bodies remained entangled, not out of urgency, but necessity. She wasn't crying. She wasn't speaking. She was just breathing. And so was he. For once, Colton didn't rush to fill the silence with promises. He didn't reach for affirmations or apologies. He let her heartbeat guide him. Eventually, she whispered, "Help me up." He stood slowly, cradling her as the water poured off their skin. He wrapped her in a thick towel and dried her with patience, the same way he used to when she was too sore to move after treatment. She didn't flinch at his touch, but she didn't smile either. He dressed her in fresh hospital-issue cotton and carried her back to bed, adjusting the blankets, checking her IV line, brushing her damp hair away from her face, not as a man trying to impress, but as one learning how to be present again. She slid under the covers, turned slightly, and closed her eyes. Colton sat in the chair by her side. Minutes passed. Then she opened her eyes again. "Don't sit over there." He hesitated. "Lie here," she said, patting the space beside her. He climbed in, careful not to disturb her or press too close. She turned, facing him, one arm draped lightly over his side. "You don't get a clean slate," she said softly. "There's no reset button. I don't want one. Good. Because I'll remember everything. I'll carry that. And when I look at you," she whispered, "sometimes I'll still see your face instead of yours." He nodded. "I'll stay anyway." Her hand moved to his chest, right above his heart. "This isn't forgiveness. I know. It's a start." He breathed into the moment. She nestled against him, closing her eyes again. And he didn't sleep. Not yet. He just held her, not like a lover, not like a man hoping to be desired, but like someone who finally understood the value of simply being, chosen again, even if it meant rebuilding everything brick by brick. Morning light crept through the blinds. A nurse knocked softly, peeked in, then gently closed the door again when she saw them curled together. Avery stirred around 7. She sat up slowly, legs curled beneath her. Colton helped adjust the bed, bringing her to a seated position. She looked over at the fruit cup from the day before and picked up a spoon. He offered to peel a banana. She let him. He cut it into small slices and placed them into a bowl. She ate in silence. "Then you always tried to fix everything with grand gestures. I thought that's what love meant." "No," she said. Love shows up in the boring parts, the hard mornings, the quiet. Colton placed the empty bowl on the tray. I'm learning. You're slow. I can live with that. She almost smiled. Later, when the doctor came in, Avery listened carefully as he discussed the next few weeks. No travel, minimal exertion, short walks around the house only, and you'll need someone with you constantly. Colton didn't wait. I'll handle it. The doctor looked to Avery for confirmation. She gave a slight nod. Delivery could happen any time after week 37, the doctor continued. We'd like to get you there. Avery asked all the right questions. She didn't cry. She didn't hesitate. Colton watched her and realized something. She wasn't just surviving. When the doctor left, she looked over at Colton. Start calling contractors. He blinked. Why? I want the guest bedroom turned into a nursery before I come home. He straightened. You want to go back to the penthouse? No. I want to go back to our home. But this time, we design it around what we actually need, not what looks good in magazines. He nodded slowly. Done. She leaned back into the pillows, eyes growing heavy again. Colton reached for the poetry book she kept beside the bed. He opened to a random page and began to read. She didn't say a word, but her hand found his and held on. The hallway outside her room smelled like lemon disinfectant and rubber soles. It was the same corridor Avery had been wheeled through, unconscious, just days earlier. Now she was walking it. Slowly, one step at a time. Her fingers curled around the aluminum walker, her legs trembling but determined. The nurse walked beside her, silent unless needed. Colton followed 2 paces behind, not hovering but present. Avery focused on the rhythm. Right foot. Pause. Left foot. Pause. Breathe. Each step sent fire up her spine, but she welcomed the ache. It meant her body still obeyed. It meant she still had control. At the end of the hallway, she stopped, turned carefully. Colton met her eyes. You all right? He asked. I'm not glass, she said, breath heavy. I'm not going to break. He nodded. Noted. The nurse helped her pivot. They started back toward the room. Colton didn't speak again until they were inside, until she was seated safely back on the edge of the bed. You want water? She shook her head. I want space. He stilled. Not from you, she clarified. From feeling helpless. The occupational therapist came later that day, a tall woman with calm energy and firm hands. She guided Avery through seated stretches. Small muscle work, breathing techniques. Colton stayed in the corner, notebook open, writing down every instruction. Avery noticed. You're not my assistant, she said between breaths. I know. Then why are you taking notes? Because when we get home, I'm not letting you do this alone. She didn't answer, but her lips twitched, just slightly. Each day after, Avery grew steadier, her steps longer, her balance stronger, her voice sharper. She asked for her phone and scrolled through missed messages. Colton waited, unsure what she'd find or what reaction it might stir. But she didn't ask about anything beyond her mother's texts and one group message from her old book club. Whatever she saw, she handled privately. He didn't press. He changed the water in her flowers, charged her phone without asking, learned how to properly tie the belt of her hospital robe so it didn't irritate her IV line. These were not grand gestures, but they were seen. On the 4th night, she sat up in bed, cross-legged, her hair tied in a low knot, glasses resting on the bridge of her nose. She was reading, the very poetry book he'd brought from home. Colton watched her from the chair. You used to read that out loud, he said. She didn't look up. I still might. You look stronger. I am. He sat forward. You want to go for another walk tomorrow? I want to try the stairs. He raised an eyebrow. Sure. If I don't start pushing now, I'll carry the fear into labor. Her tone was steady, controlled. Colton nodded. Then I'll be there. She turned a page. I know. At dawn, she stood at the foot of the bed without support. He rushed over, startled. I'm okay, she said, steadying herself. I just needed to see if I could. He didn't reach for her. He waited. She took one step, then another, toward him. When she reached him, her hand lifted and touched his cheek. I can't forget what happened, but I can start remembering who I was before it broke me. You're even more than you were, he said, She let her hand drop, and for the first time, she leaned into him, not because she needed to, but because she chose to. The news broke 3 days after Avery first walked unassisted. It started with whispers on social media, rumors from an anonymous tip sent to a gossip blog known for leaking stories too personal to be invented. A grainy photo of Colton outside the hospital's emergency wing went viral. Then came speculation, the mistress, the collapse, the ambulance, the silence. By noon, 3 major business outlets were reporting it. Avery saw the headlines before Colton did. She was sitting up in bed, scrolling. Her fingers didn't shake. Her jaw didn't tighten. She simply read. Then she turned the phone face down. Colton entered moments later with a warm compress for her lower back. "They know," she said, before he could speak. He paused, reading her expression. "You saw it?" She nodded. "Everyone else will soon." Colton sat beside her on the edge of the bed, compress still in hand. "I'll issue a statement." "Don't." His eyes snapped to hers. "I mean it," she continued. "Don't feed it. Let it burn itself out." He hesitated. "They're talking about you, about what happened, and if you try to defend me, it'll make it worse. Let them talk. But you didn't ask for this." "No," she said, "but I'm not going to waste energy protecting a reputation I didn't volunteer to have." He placed the compress behind her and adjusted the pillow behind her spine. She didn't pull away. She looked at him carefully. "Did you tell anyone?" "No one. Not even the board. Then the leak came from the girl," she said. "Or someone she told." He didn't deny it. She looked away. "This is what happens when you break something that belonged to both of us. I carry the fallout. I'll fix it. You won't, not this part. You can't control perception." Silence settled between them. Then she added, "But you can protect what's left." He nodded once. "Whatever you need. Don't feed the press. Don't give interviews. Don't arrange damage control." "Okay, just get me home." The hospital arranged for a private discharge. No press, no announcements, no statements. Colton paid for a decoy route out the back, scheduled during a shift change. He carried her to the car himself. No photographers saw them leave, but someone did snap a photo through tinted glass as the car pulled into traffic, Avery in a soft blue dress, head resting against Colton's chest. By nightfall, the image had circled the globe. Some captions speculated on forgiveness. Others dissected her fragility. One blogger described her as the woman who collapsed under betrayal, but walked again before anyone expected. Colton stayed off the internet. Avery didn't, but she said nothing. Not even when someone sent her a direct message filled with vitriol. Not when tabloids named the other woman, misquoted timelines, or speculated on whether she'd stay in the marriage. She stayed quiet. Her silence wasn't passive. It was power. Back at the penthouse, the furniture had been rearranged. The old guest room had been transformed. Soft lighting, cream-colored walls, a crib in one corner, a rocking chair beside the window. Colton had hired a design team while she recovered. Every piece was intentional. Soft. Quiet. Gentle. Avery walked through the doorway and stopped. "You remembered everything I said I wanted." "I listened," he said. "For once." She stepped inside, ran her fingers over the side of the crib. "It's beautiful. You are." She didn't respond, but her hand reached for his. The next morning, the headline faded beneath another scandal, something involving a senator and a secret account. Avery didn't celebrate. She just brewed her own tea, sat by the nursery window, and let the light touch her skin. Colton joined her, sitting silently nearby, his laptop unopened. She glanced sideways. "They'll expect you to respond eventually. I'm not answering to them, just to you." She sipped her tea. That was enough, for now. The apartment was quiet, settled into its new rhythm. The city outside pulsed as always, but inside the penthouse, life moved slower now, on Avery's terms. She rested in bed beneath dim reading lights, propped up by pillows. Her body still ached from effort, but each day it responded a little more. If you're enjoying this moment in our love and twilight story, now's the perfect time to join our growing family of dreamers and believers. Don't just watch, be part of the journey. Tap that subscribe button and let your heart stay connected with every new tale we share. A simple like shows us your love, and when you share, you help others discover the magic too. Remember, your support fuels more stories of romance, wonder, and twilight beauty. So pause for a second, click, subscribe, and let's keep building this world of love together. Colton lay beside her, one hand resting lightly on her belly, the other behind his head. He wasn't asleep. Neither was she. Sleep came in small doses these days, broken up by baby movement, discomfort, or just the weight of memory. Avery stared at the ceiling. Did you ever imagine what it would feel like to meet him? Colton turned his head slightly toward her. Only every day since we heard his heartbeat. She took a slow breath. I used to wonder if I'd ever get to this moment, just lying in bed, knowing he's safe, knowing we're close. Colton didn't speak. He simply waited. Avery's voice softened. I thought about giving up after the second round. Maybe it wasn't meant to happen. Maybe I wasn't meant to be a mother. He shifted closer. You were always meant to be. Her hand moved over her stomach. He hasn't kicked tonight. He's probably resting. You had a big day. She paused. That's not what I need to hear. Colton sat up, adjusting the pillows around her and placing both hands on either side of her bump. He lowered his head, kissed the swell just below her ribs. Hey, Bryden, he whispered. It's midnight, kid. Your mom's worried. How about letting her know you're in there, all right? He looked up at her. Give him a minute. Avery smiled faintly, but it didn't reach her eyes. They waited. The clock on the wall ticked slowly. Her breathing was even, but her fingers curled into the blanket. Then, soft and strong, a kick. Not just once, twice, 3 times. She gasped and grabbed his hand, pressing it where she felt the movement. Colton grinned. He's dancing. Her eyes filled with tears. He heard you. Colton kissed her again, this time not on her belly, but her forehead. He heard us. She sank back into the pillow. Every time I start to drift into doubt, he reminds me I'm not doing this alone. You're not. Her eyes lingered on his face. I believed I could do this without you, but now I realize I didn't want to. I never should have made you feel like you had to. You didn't just hurt me that morning, she said slowly. You fractured my trust in the one person I swore would never betray me. I know. But every time you stay, she added, every time you choose presence over performance, I feel a crack start to seal. Colton didn't try to fill the silence. He just let her words land. Then she said, I want to see his face. You will. I want to feel his fingers wrap around mine. You will. And when he comes, I don't want anyone in the room but you and the doctor. Colton looked at her, steady and firm. Done. No photographers, no publicists, no announcements, no press outside. There won't be. Avery exhaled and turned to her side. Just us. He pulled the blanket over both of them, settling in behind her. Just us. She shifted her body until her back met his chest, his hand instinctively returning to her stomach. Bryden kicked once more, then stillness. And for the first time in weeks, Avery slept with her entire body, relaxed. Colton stayed awake a little longer, watching her, feeling their sun, and knowing that sometimes redemption didn't roar. It arrived quietly. At midnight, with a single, perfect kick, the morning started softly. Golden light spilled through the curtains. The city stirred below, quieted by a Sunday haze. Avery stood by the window in her robe, one hand on the cool glass, the other resting beneath her stomach. Colton watched from across the room, his coffee forgotten. There was something different about her posture, still calm, but braced, as if waiting for something inevitable. She turned slightly. They're stronger. The kicks? The contractions. He set the mug down. How far apart? They're not regular yet, she said, eyes still focused on the skyline. But they're different. He crossed the room quickly. Do we need to go in? She shook her head. Not yet. Let's wait. Colton didn't argue. Instead, he stayed close. They had rehearsed this. Bags were packed. Routes mapped. Doctor on standby. But still, the energy between them shifted. Not panic. Not fear. Something sacred. A few hours passed. Avery sat, stood, paced, and sat again. Each time she winced, Colton was there, steady and silent. By early afternoon, she gripped the edge of the kitchen island mid-sentence. She inhaled sharply. That one wasn't like the others. How long was it? She checked the clock. 5 minutes since the last. Colton's voice lowered. It's time. She didn't argue. They moved without chaos. He helped her change into a loose dress. slipped on her slippers. She grabbed the folded note she'd written weeks ago, tucked in a book of baby names they hadn't agreed on. Colton placed a hand on the small of her back as they rode the elevator down, the silence between them heavy but unspoken. The car was already waiting in the garage. He helped her inside, adjusted the seatbelt gently across her hips. She winced as another contraction hit. He placed a hand on her thigh. Breathe through it. I am. Her knuckles turned white as she squeezed the door handle. Outside, the city moved on, unaware. But inside that car, time narrowed to breath and pain and presence. Colton drove. No music, no conversation, only focus. At the hospital entrance, staff were ready. They moved quickly, but not frantically. Avery was wheeled into a private delivery suite. The nurse spoke gently but efficiently. 37 weeks and 5 days. First baby. History of collapse. We've been monitoring fetal stress. Avery gripped Colton's hand. Her voice was low, clipped. No epidural yet. The nurse nodded. We'll check your dilation first. 2 hours passed. Avery labored quietly. No screaming, no dramatic theatrics. Just clenched teeth, controlled breath, and a grip on Colton's hand that didn't loosen. He stood beside her, wiping her forehead, helping her shift positions, whispering words only she needed to hear. When she cried out once, only once, he kissed her temple. I've got you. Her voice broke. Don't sit down. I won't. She leaned forward, bracing on the bed. Talk to him, she whispered. Colton knelt beside her, pressed his lips to her belly. Hey, Bryden, it's time. Your mom's been waiting for you. So have I. Let's do this together, all right? Another contraction tore through her. Her breath stuttered. Don't stop. I'm right here. She looked down at him. Sweat streaked her brow. No matter what happens. Don't, he said firmly. But if, no. He stood, brushing the hair from her face. You're both coming out of this. I won't accept anything else. She nodded once. Then came the nurse. You're at 10. It's time. The room transformed. Lights adjusted. Instruments rolled in. The doctor appeared, gloves on, voice clear and commanding. Colton helped Avery shift into position. He stood beside her, holding her leg, gripping her hand, his entire body locked into hers. Not in intimacy, but solidarity. The doctor looked at Avery. You ready? She nodded. Okay. On the next contraction, I want you to push. Colton leaned closer. You've got this. Avery dug her heels in and pushed. The low groans, the squeezing of hands that had long since gone numb. Avery's voice cracked with each contraction, her jaw clenched tight as she bore down again and again. Colton stayed close, one hand behind her neck, the other gripping hers. His shirt stuck to his back. His forehead glistened with sweat. But he didn't waver. He counted with her. He breathed with her. He whispered between pushes, You're almost there. You're doing so good. I've never seen anything stronger. The doctor crouched in position. We've got hair. One more push. Avery sucked in a breath and pushed again, screaming this time. Not from fear, not from weakness, but from the power of release. The nurse leaned forward. Heads out. Colton's grip tightened. Then, without warning, Avery collapsed backward. Not unconscious, just spent. Breath gone. Tears flooding her eyes. Colton hovered over her. You okay? Avery. Look at me. Her hand reached for him. I'm here, he said, kissing her fingers. Don't let go now. He's almost here. The nurse guided her back into a pushing position. This is it. Next push, we're delivering. Avery gathered what was left of her strength. One final push tore from her body with a guttural, primal sound that cracked the walls. Then came the silence. A pause. And then, crying. Loud, guttural, fierce. Bryden had arrived. The doctor lifted the child gently, glancing quickly at the cord. Healthy boy, strong lungs. Colton staggered back a step. He didn't expect a cry, but he did. No slow build, just immediate, unfiltered tears. He pressed his hands over his face and let out a sound he didn't recognize, part sob, part relief, part surrender. He didn't notice when the nurse handed him scissors. Didn't realize until she repeated herself. Would you like to cut the cord? He nodded, took the tool with shaking hands and cut clean through. The sound of the cord snapping was quiet. but its meaning was thunderous. The baby was placed on Avery's chest. She cried quietly, tears slipping sideways down her cheeks. She stared at Bryden like she'd known him forever and yet was meeting him for the first time. His skin was still flushed, his body slick and trembling, but his mouth instinctively rooted toward her. Colton stood at the edge of the bed, staring at the two of them. I've never seen anything so perfect. Avery looked up at him. He's here, Colton echoed. The doctor stepped aside. The nurses moved around the room, checking vitals, noting stats, preparing to weigh and clean. But for a full minute, no one interrupted the moment. Colton reached out slowly and touched Bryden's back. The baby flinched, then settled. Avery closed her eyes briefly, still exhausted. I didn't think I could do it, she whispered. You did, Colton replied, voice hoarse. You didn't just do it. You carried him through everything, even when I didn't deserve to be by your side. She opened her eyes again, meeting his. We're not finished, she said. I know, but this is a beginning. Colton leaned in, pressed his forehead against hers. Then he placed his hand over Bryden's back and let out a breath that had been caught in his lungs for months. No suits, no reputation, no cameras, just a man, a woman, and their son. Alive, safe, real. The quiet after delivery was surreal. Monitors beeped steadily in the background. A soft lull wrapped around the room, broken only by the cooing of nurses and the occasional sniffle from Avery as she watched her newborn son rest skin to skin on her chest. Bryden's breathing had stabilized. His tiny fists occasionally flexed against her collarbone, his mouth rooting until he found the comfort of her warmth again. Colton had stepped away to wash his hands, staring at the sink longer than necessary. When he returned, his expression had changed. Not just the awe of becoming a father, but something deeper. Humbled, grounded, quietly overwhelmed. He sat on the edge of the bed, careful not to jostle her, and stared at the child between them. He's small, Colton whispered. Avery smiled faintly. Not to me. Bryden stirred, letting out a sound that wasn't quite a cry, more like a complaint. His face scrunched, lips opening in search of more. Avery adjusted slightly, guiding him gently. He's hungry. Colton watched her, every motion fluid and sure, as though her body had remembered something ancient, something sacred. She glanced at him. You okay? He blinked once. I don't know. I thought I was prepared, but it's different. Avery didn't interrupt. She let him sit with it. I watched you, he said, through everything, and I kept thinking, I've never known real courage until now. Bryden let out a sharper cry, louder than before. It echoed off the walls, his first true announcement. The nurses turned, but Avery held up a hand. It's all right. He's just finding his lungs. Colton stepped closer, hovering. Can I? She nodded. He slid his hands beneath the swaddled body, careful and slow, lifting Bryden into his arms for the first time. The weight startled him. Not physically, emotionally. Bryden blinked at him, unfocused, his mouth still twitching in tiny movements. Colton's voice was barely audible. Hey, buddy. The baby responded with a whimper, then silence, nestling into the crook of his elbow. Colton looked at Avery, eyes glistening. I never held a baby before. You're doing fine. He exhaled, a shaky breath. What if I mess this up? You will, she said, without malice. So will I. He looked down again. But we'll figure it out, she added, her voice firmer. Colton nodded slowly, as if sealing an unspoken pact. An hour passed. The nurses came in to check vitals again, gently lifting Bryden to weigh and measure. 6 pounds, 8 ounces, one said. 19 inches long, good reflexes. Avery watched, hands folded over her lap, finally allowing herself to recline. She was pale but alert. Colton stood beside the bassinet where Bryden had been placed, peeking at him like a boy inspecting treasure. When Bryden started to cry again, this time a shrill, high-pitched sound, Colton lifted him instinctively. Bryden quieted almost immediately. Avery smirked. You've been chosen. Colton chuckled. I'm terrified. Good. Means you care. Later that night, when the room dimmed and nurses offered them some peace, Avery lay with eyes half closed while Colton paced with Bryden against his chest. He'd removed his jacket, loosened his shirt, and unbuttoned his cuffs. Bryden slept better that way. Every so often, Colton paused to look down at the boy, adjusting his hold, humming tunelessly. Avery spoke without opening her eyes. "You're going to be a good father." "I hope so." "You already are." Silence followed. Then quietly, Colton replied, "Thank you for not giving up on me, even when I gave you every reason to." She didn't speak again, but her hand reached out. He took it, and between them, Bryden breathed, slow, peaceful, whole. The marble conference room at Wayne and Preston's global headquarters had never been silent. Not like this. Colton stood at the head of the long glass table, dressed in a charcoal suit that bore no pocket square, no flash of silk or arrogance. Just a man, tall and composed, hands flat against the surface as his eyes scanned the executives seated before him. They all waited for him to begin. Most were unaware. Some had guessed. None expected what was about to happen. He cleared his throat. "Effective immediately. I am stepping down as CEO." Gasps. One board member actually dropped his pen. Another leaned forward. "Is this some kind of transition announcement?" "No," Colton said firmly. "There's no transition plan. This is not temporary. I'm leaving." A murmur rippled across the room like a low, ominous drumbeat. "You built this company," another director said, voice rising. "You made it what it is. You don't get to walk away just because—" "I do," Colton interrupted. "And I am—" Silence again. He took a breath. "I didn't come here to be debated. This isn't open for discussion. I'm informing you, and I'm doing it respectfully." One of the senior partners leaned back, arms crossed. "The shareholders will panic. Our stock will plunge. You're abandoning your post at a vulnerable moment." "I disagree," Colton replied. "The company is stable. Profits are high. Leadership is prepared." "You are the leadership," someone barked from the far end. "Not anymore." The press release had already been sent. His legal team would follow with documentation. He wasn't here for logistics. He was here to close a door. The director of strategy, a woman who had worked with Colton for 12 years, looked stunned. "Is this about the scandal? Your wife? Damage control?" "No," he said simply. "It's about my son." That silenced them more than anything else. "My son was born 3 days ago. I was there. I held him. And something shifted. Permanently. Some faces softened. Others didn't." "You could take paternity leave," someone offered weakly. Colton smiled, but it wasn't warm. "This isn't about time off. This is about who I want to be when I wake up in the morning, and who I refuse to become again." One of the founding members spoke up, slower, more deliberate. "Do you understand what you're giving up? This office? This empire?" Colton nodded. "Yes. And none of it feels like loss." He turned to the window. It overlooked the skyline he'd once ruled with ruthless efficiency. Towers he'd helped finance. A city that knew his name. But now, it just looked distant. A version of his past self. Colton turned back around. "I used to think legacy meant power. Now I know its presence. My child won't remember my net worth, but he'll remember who fed him at 2 a.m., who taught him how to ride a bike, who showed up." The room shifted. A few looked away. One man stood to protest, but Colton's calm raised hand stopped him. "This company will go on, and maybe better without me, because I was no longer serving it for the right reasons." The meeting ended faster than anyone expected. He didn't wait for applause or backlash. He didn't offer parting words or instructions. He left his badge, keys, and access codes in a sealed envelope. As he stepped out of the conference room, the executive assistant at the desk outside rose to her feet. "Sir, Colton, do you need security escort?" He shook his head. "No, just my car." She handed him the keys. It was the first time he'd parked underground and walked out through the main entrance. As he reached the glass doors, he paused. Reporters were already gathering. Cameras flashed. He straightened his posture, not for pride, but for clarity, then walked into the storm, not as the billionaire CEO, but as a father going home. The penthouse no longer smelled like cologne and leather. It smelled like lavender baby lotion, and sometimes warm milk. Colton didn't mind. Gone were the glass board schedules and hourly investor calls. His new reality was sleep cycles, sterilized bottles, and lullabies he was still learning to hum. The first time he tried changing Bryden's diaper solo, he held the wipes like surgical tools. Avery laughed softly from the bed. "It's a baby, not a bomb. Feels like I'm diffusing something." Bryden wiggled under his careful hands. One misplaced fold, and the diaper refused to cooperate. The tabs stuck to themselves, not the fabric. Colton sighed. "Here," Avery said gently, sitting up. "Slide your thumb under first. That way the tabs don't curl inward." Colton tried again. Bryden kicked once, then stilled. The new diaper fit snug. "Got it," he muttered, eyes narrowing with intense satisfaction. "You just changed your first diaper." He looked up at her. "And I'm not even wearing gloves." The nursery became his boardroom. He rearranged the rocking chair twice for optimal light angle during midnight feedings. He adjusted the height of the crib himself when Bryden started turning. He timed how long lullabies took before sleep, tracking it mentally like quarterly data. He even started brewing chamomile tea for Avery by instinct. "Nobelium sugar, extra honey, and 2 mint leaves," he recited once, walking in with a tray. She raised a brow. "You're learning. I've been trained by the best." She sipped, exhaled. "You never made me tea before. I never paid attention before." Sometimes at night, she'd wake up to find him already pacing the nursery. Bryden would be curled into his chest, tiny cheek pressed to Colton's collarbone, while he sang, not quite in tune, but low and rhythmic. She listened from the doorway one evening. "Did you just sing 'Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star' 4 times? Colton turned, sheepish. He likes the repetition. "You're humming in key now." I Googled the chords. "You never did anything halfway, did you?" "Nope." In the mornings, he'd bring her slippers before she even asked. When Bryden needed a bath, he'd test the water with his elbow and practice holding the baby's neck, just like the nurse had shown. "I read babies lose heat fast," he said once. "So I'm towel, drying in sections, head first." She blinked. "You read that?" 6 articles, 2 videos. And I subscribed to a parenting newsletter. Avery leaned against the doorframe. "You're serious about this?" "I'm serious about us." One afternoon, Avery found the dining table filled with folded onesies, sorted by size and color. "You alphabetized baby clothes?" "Only the ones with logos." She couldn't help it. She laughed. A full, tear-filled laugh. And he stood there, hands on his hips, grinning like he just closed a $1 million merger. There were fumbles, like the time he used the wrong cream and Bryden got a rash, or when he melted a bottle nipple trying to sterilize it with boiling water. But each time he corrected the mistake, fast and humble. "I don't need to be perfect," he told Avery. "Just present. Always." She looked at him then, really looked. Gone was the man who once measured his worth in quarterly gains and signature deals. What stood before her was something better. A man folding bibs. A man memorizing lullabies. A man who knew the difference between gripe water and baby gas drops. At dusk, Colton would walk the nursery with Bryden held tight to his chest, humming something old and soothing. Sometimes he didn't sing at all, just held the child and listened to the silence, letting it seep in. And when he returned to the bedroom, Avery would be waiting. Hair unbrushed. Tired, but glowing. Not from wealth, from being seen, loved, held in every small act of devotion that had replaced diamonds and declarations. Colton slipped into bed beside her, wrapping one arm beneath her shoulders as she leaned into him. This wasn't power. This was peace. And for once, he didn't need anything else. It was raining that evening. Not violently, just enough to tap lightly against the tall windows of the penthouse, blurring the skyline in streaks of silver. Colton sat quietly on the couch, a warm bottle in hand. Bryden was asleep on his chest, one tiny hand clutching his father's shirt like he never wanted to let go. Avery stood in the doorway for a while, watching them. He didn't notice her at first, but when she finally spoke, her voice was soft, measured. "I remember everything." Colton's head lifted slightly. She walked in and sat across from him, not beside him, not too close. "I remember the day I found you with her. I remember the sound my heart made. It was almost like a physical snap." He didn't interrupt. "I remember the silence that followed. The doctor's voice, the cold floors, the ultrasound screen blinking like my body was trying to survive a betrayal." He closed his eyes. "I know," he said quietly. "No," she replied, not harshly, but firmly. "You don't, and I don't expect you to, because some things can't be undone. They can only be carried." She folded her hands in her lap. "You're doing better. I see it. I feel it. But you need to understand something. I'm listening. Forgiveness isn't a moment. It's not a speech, or a ring, or a dozen sleepless nights with bottles and lullabies. He nodded slowly. It's not even you resigning from everything to be here. I didn't do it for forgiveness, he said, voice low. I did it because I couldn't live with the man I was. That matters, she whispered. But even that doesn't wipe the slate clean. There are rules now. She looked him dead in the eye. You don't get blind access to my heart again just because you came home. Colton swallowed. Bryden shifted slightly against him. I'm not asking for blind access, Colton said. I'm asking for truth, even when it's hard, even when it hurts. Good, Avery nodded. Because redemption is daily work. It doesn't clock out. It doesn't skip Sundays. It's not earned once and cashed in forever. I accept that. You'll need to, because I will have bad days. There will be moments I'll look at you and remember everything. And when that happens, I need you not to crumble. I won't. I need you not to turn it into guilt and make me carry that too. Colton closed his eyes again, this time slower, deeper. I can do that, he murmured. I will do that. The rain outside deepened its rhythm. Avery stood and walked toward him. Her hand hovered above Bryden's head for a moment before brushing his soft curls. I love you, she whispered. But love isn't a cover for wounds. It's what makes healing possible, not automatic. Colton's throat tightened. I know. She sat beside him now, not across the room, not on the edge of retreat. Bryden stirred and made a soft cooing noise. They both looked down at him. So, she said, exhaling slowly, what comes next? Whatever you decide, Colton answered. No, she shook her head gently. This isn't just my decision anymore. You're not a guest here, Colton. You're his father, my husband, but a husband with rules. I'll honor them. Then we begin here, she said, eyes not leaving his. With honesty, with patience, with presence. He kissed the top of Bryden's head. Avery didn't move. But for the first time in months, she leaned into him. Not fully, but enough to say, we're not finished. Not yet. The chapel was bathed in a soft morning glow. Sunlight streamed through arched windows, painting the marble floors in hues of gold. White orchids lined the pews. The scent of rosewater drifted in the air, subtle and sacred. Colton stood at the front with Bryden in his arms, dressed in a custom, cream christening gown that brushed against his father's tailored suit. The child blinked, wide-eyed and calm, as if sensing the reverence of the moment. Avery stood beside them, elegant in a pale lilac dress, her hand gently resting on Bryden's back. Her gaze wasn't fixed on the crowd. It was on her son, on the future they were carving, one vow at a time. The room was filled with people, but there was no press, no photographers, just family, chosen, not curated, aunts, cousins, a few of Colton's board members who had become genuine friends, former nannies, church elders, people who had walked with them through storms, and now gathered to witness their new dawn. The minister stepped forward and lifted his hands. Today, we welcome Bryden Colton Hart into this family, into this faith, into this life of love. Water dripped gently onto the boy's forehead. He stirred, but did not cry. A hush settled over the room as the minister prayed, and for the first time in a long time Colton felt still. No emails, no negotiations, just breath and gratitude. When the prayer ended, the minister stepped back and gestured. Colton would like to say a few words. Colton held Bryden a little tighter, then passed him gently to Avery, brushing her hand as he did. He stepped forward, cleared his throat, and faced the room. I've spoken in boardrooms across the globe, to shareholders, investors, entire stadiums full of people. A small chuckle rippled. But this is the first time I'm speaking from a place that matters more than legacy, more than wealth. He turned to look at Avery and Bryden. This is about love, about learning, and about thanking the woman who made both possible. Avery looked up, startled. Colton's voice remained steady. There was a time I thought I had everything, but I was blind, not in the literal sense, but emotionally. I mistook success for substance. I mistook noise for meaning. And in doing so, I nearly lost the only two souls who've ever made me whole. The room was silent. I'm not here today because I earned forgiveness. I'm here because Avery chose grace. She chose not to harden. She chose motherhood over bitterness. She chose growth over revenge. She didn't just give birth to our son. She gave me a second chance to become someone worthy of being called father and husband. Avery's fingers tightened slightly around Bryden. Colton's eyes glistened, but he continued. "To my son," he said, glancing down at the baby, "I promise to never again mistake presence for proximity. I promise to be there when you cry, when you fall, when you soar." And to Avery, his voice cracked slightly, "Thank you for every day you stayed, for every night you rocked Bryden alone while I was lost in the noise, for not closing the door, even when I deserved to be left behind it." Avery looked away briefly, breath catching. "I may have stepped down from the CEO title," Colton added, "but this, fatherhood, partnership, family, this is the only position I never want to retire from." He took one last breath, then nodded, and stepped back. There was no applause, no standing ovation, just something quieter, deeper, a collective inhale, a sacred understanding. Avery blinked slowly, then passed Bryden back into Colton's arms as the minister stepped forward again. The final blessing was spoken, and as the sunlight bathed the trio at the front, it felt less like ceremony and more like covenant. After the christening, there was no gala reception, no red carpet, just a garden lunch behind the chapel. Laughter, simple food, clinking glasses. Colton carried Bryden on his shoulder while Avery laughed with her aunt. He caught her eye once. She didn't look away, and in that fleeting glance, she didn't see a CEO anymore. She saw a man who had finally arrived, where he was always meant to be, home. The nursery was quiet. Only the soft rotation of the moon lamp above Bryden's crib gave the room a gentle pulse of light. Pastel stars circled on the ceiling, reflecting off the painted walls. A lullaby hummed low from the speaker in the corner, barely audible, barely there. Colton stood by the doorway, watching. Avery was already inside. She had just laid Bryden down. The baby, swaddled and dreaming, let out a tiny yawn, his mouth stretching in that unconscious way only infants do. Avery adjusted the blanket, then stood back and just looked at her son, her whole world. Colton didn't speak. He waited until her eyes met his. Then he stepped in, closed the door behind him, and crossed the room slowly. She turned to him, arms loosely folded, unsure of what came next. He didn't stop until he was in front of her. Then he dropped to one knee, but it wasn't a plea. It wasn't desperation. It was reverence, respect, love. His head bowed for a moment before he looked up at her. The same way he once did at an altar, only this time, there was no audience, no officiant, no ceremony, just truth, just the woman he almost lost. "I know I've said I'm sorry," he began softly, "but tonight I don't want to apologize." Her brow furrowed slightly. "I want to promise." He rested a hand on her knee. She didn't move. "I promise to show up, not just in big ways, but in quiet ones, in baby baths, in midnight feedings, in the seconds when your breath hitches because memories return." She said nothing. "I promise to love you through those seconds." Avery's arms slowly unfolded. "I promise to never again look for wholeness in places that cannot offer it, because everything I need is here. It's you. It's him. It's the quiet of this room." Colton's voice trembled now, but he kept going. "I promise to listen, even when I'm scared of what you might say, even when the truth makes me ache." Her eyes welled, but she didn't look away. "I promise," he said finally, "to never kneel for business, for money, for power, only for love, only for us." He stayed there, quiet, waiting, not expecting, not demanding, just there. Then she knelt down too. Their knees touched, and Avery leaned in. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. She kissed him, not rushed, not frantic, slow, full, a kiss of presence, a kiss of beginning. His hand slid behind her head. Her fingers curled into his shirt, and for the first time in a long time, their bodies weren't just pressed close, they were in sync, breathing together, choosing each other again. In a room meant for new life, they found a new version of their love. Later, they lay on the rug beside the crib, her head on his chest, fingers laced. The moon lamp cast soft glows across the walls. Neither of them said much. They didn't need to, because in that silence lived everything. Forgiveness, faith, forever. The house was still, not empty, just quiet in the way homes are when love fills every corner. Downstairs, a few baby toys lay scattered on the plush living room rug. A tea mug sat beside a worn-out parenting book on the coffee table. The fireplace crackled low, its light flickering against framed photos lining the mantel. In one picture, Colton, Avery and Bryden under a sycamore tree. In another, a close-up of Bryden's tiny hand clutching his father's finger. Above it all, a new frame, a black and white portrait, all three of them, together, smiling, whole. Upstairs, Colton stood by the window of their bedroom, the curtain drawn, back just enough to let the last golden light of day touch his face. Avery was behind him, seated at the vanity, brushing her hair. Bryden had just been tucked in. Neither said anything for a while, just the rhythm of a shared evening, a rhythm hard-earned. "I used to think legacy was built on empires," Colton finally said, voice calm. "On towers of glass and steel, on quarterly gains and annual reports." Avery didn't interrupt. He turned from the window and looked at her reflection in the mirror. "But it isn't." She met his eyes, waiting. "It's built in the soft places, in showing up, in small gestures that leave no headlines but echo in hearts." He walked toward her, lifted her hand, and kissed it. "You taught me that." That night, as they both checked on Bryden one more time, Avery whispered gently over the crib, brushing a curl from his forehead, "I pray the world is kind to you, son. But more importantly, that you become kind to the world." Colton added, "And that you never confuse success with love. One can fade, the other anchors." They stood side by side, watching their son breathe, in, out, as if the entire universe had slowed to match his rhythm. The next morning, Bryden's laughter filled the halls. Colton followed him on hands and knees as the toddler squealed down the corridor. Avery leaned against the doorway with her arms folded, smiling like someone who had walked through fire and come out carrying water. Later they gathered in the backyard, just the three of them. No grandeur, just sunlight, a picnic blanket, and orange slices. Colton bit into one and winced dramatically. Bryden giggled. Avery shook her head, laughing. That was the moment a thought passed between them, unspoken but clear. This is the life, not the one sold in glossy spreads or dictated by others, but the one fought for, the one rebuilt. Growth, they learned, wasn't about becoming someone new. It was about shedding the layers that never belonged in the first place. Family wasn't just the result of biology. It was the result of bravery, of standing by someone when love costs everything, and staying when it still does. And legacy? Legacy wasn't about a last name etched in gold. It was about the quiet proof left in a child's giggle, a partner's trust returned, a life once fractured, now healed. And so, under the warm light of a second chance, Avery and Colton did what not all couples do. They chose each other again. This time, not in front of guests or guided by vows written by others. This time, in moments, in days that blur into nights, in lullabies half remembered, in kisses, behind nursery doors, and in blessings whispered beside a crib. And that, in the end, was the real story. Not the scandal, not the pain, but the love that rose quietly after, and stayed. Thank you for being part of the Love and Twilight journey, where every story blends romance, mystery, and the magic of connection. If today's episode touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. It's the simplest way to keep our community glowing. Your support helps us create even more tales that inspire love, hope, and wonder. Tell us your thoughts in the comments. We love hearing your voice. And remember to hit the notification bell so you never miss a new moment of Twilight magic. Together, let's keep love alive, one story at a time.